Hello everybody and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. This week we're talking to Dermot Crowley about Lead Smart. It's his new book, but it's also an amazing concept. But we get into some amazing conversations and Bob Geldof is brought up a lot. To find out why, listen through. It's a great conversation. There's a great story there. And as always, have a magical week. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. As I'm sure you've already seen from the title of this episode, it's very exciting. We've got a guest on today, and we'll get to them shortly. But first, let's check in with the regular team, see what's happening. So I might start with John today. John, how are you going? How's the week been?
Week's been pretty good, Jez. Did some teaching during the week, which went extremely well, so that was great. The weather's here in Canberra is fantastic. Been out doing some running this morning and this week, so that's even better. So no, it's been a great week. Loving it.
That's amazing. It's always nice, John, when you can get out and do running instead of running some errands, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Jez.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you on again, John. I might go to Grahame. Grahame, how are you going this week?
I'm good, Jez. Thanks. I'm at home. Had a little bit of time up in Canberra earlier in the week, caught up with some of the kids, which was good. Lots of coaching at the moment. And one of our little slithery friends is back on the veranda, which is always a fun experience for me. Scared of it. Luckily, this one has legs.
Well, that's
so very
nice.
Excited about that. But it's a blue tongue, probably about yay long, and was very indignant that I wanted to take its photo and wanted to check that it actually had legs. But there you go. I am living the dream.
Well, that's good. We're excited for more reptilian updates, I guess, as the season wears on, you know?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. And Danette, how are you going? Different background this week. What's happening with you?
Yes, so I'm in Melbourne for the Thought Leader Immersion today. Got to catch up with Jez and Kanika last night. And straight after this, we're catching up again for lunch, which will be awesome. And on my flight up, I happened to pick up this book at the airport lounge, and I am about 3/4 of the way through it, and it's awesome. Anyone who can't see it because they're listening, this is Dermot's new book, Lead Smart. It is awesome.
Amazing. Thanks for that, Danette. And we'll touch on that very book very shortly. But before we get into that, Dermot, how has your week been?
Hi, guys. My week has been really good. I got to start the week off up the coast. So we've got a place up the coast, and the weather was particularly good on Monday. So I stayed up there, did a bit of delivery from up there on Tuesday, and then came back. So that was really nice. And it's going to end on a bit of a high as well, because it looks like we're buying a puppy tomorrow. So I'm very excited about that. We are going to look at the puppy tomorrow, but I know that means we're buying the bloody thing. So it's going to be great.
What sort of puppy, Dermot? You got to share now.
We are looking at a cavoodle. We've already got a Maltese poodle who is 18. And we just thought that maybe in this last couple of years, he might like a little bit of puppy company. So, yeah.
Oh.
That's amazing. We love that, Dermot. What an exciting start to this podcast before we've even dived in. And Graham's just put in the chat for everybody to run away from this dog. But I want to introduce Dermot to people that may be being introduced to Dermot for the first time. Beyond being a great dog lover, it seems like, here's some extra facts about Dermot that I wanted to share. So Dermot is one of Australia's leading thought leaders on productivity. He has over 25 years of experience teaching people to work more effectively in the modern workplace. And he's been running his own productivity training business for over 20 years. He's the author of 4 books, Smart Work, Smart Teams, Urgent, and his latest book, Lead Smart, which we'll be touching on shortly. Dermot's current focus is working with leadership teams on creating more productive team cultures. Love that, Dermot. I'm so excited to get into the conversation today. So I think, we're going to be talking about your newest book and the concept of Lead Smart. So I think let's just start there. Dermot, what is Lead Smart in a sort of broad sense before we get into the questions today?
Sure. So look, a lot of my experience has been working with individuals and teams in corporate Australia and around the world. basically on their personal productivity. And one of the things that I realized when I wrote my first book, Smart Work, was that productivity was more than just personal productivity. It was also a cultural issue in organizations. And that kind of led me to write my second book and my third book, which Smart Teams and Urgent both talk about productivity cultures, and the idea that if we can create healthier productivity cultures, then people's personal productivity will be more sustainable. But again, in writing those, my realization was that none of this is really going to be sustained over time unless we get leadership involved. And the challenge I've always had is leaders in organizations need this stuff the most, but they are often the least likely to actually invest time into learning how to be more productive. So Lead Smart was kind of the bookend to my Smart trilogy. And it's really aimed at leaders and leadership teams and getting them to think about not just their own personal productivity and what they need to do to operate at a high level of productivity, but also how do they lead those more productive cultures within their teams. And yeah, it seems to be a body of work that makes sense to my clients, and it's certainly one that I love running.
Amazing. It's such a good topic, and it covers a lot of things that I think we're really passionate about here at Magical Learning. So it's a perfect book to talk about and a perfect topic. So I might start with Danette, because Danette, you've had a read of this book as well, and you've got a question here. So I guess before we get to your question, just some thoughts on the book, and then you can jump into your question.
So I learned a lot about Dermot in this book, which I love, and he mentions a number of people that we share in common, so it's beautiful. Dermot, I've got to say, I didn't know about OneNote, so I've now am using OneNote. So that changed my world in terms of I'm always buying moleskins, and now I'm like, oh, I can do this electronically. So that was awesome. But I reckon you've got to tell people about. Dermot loves music, loves the odd pub as well. I reckon our listeners would love to hear about you meeting Bob Geldof.
Oh, yes. This is a very, very true story, and I often look back on it and truly cringe. Growing up in Dublin, Bob Geldof was a bit of a legend before even Live Aid and all of that. He was the lead singer in the Boomtown Rats. He was the star of one of my favorite movies, Pink Floyd, The Wall. And, just a well-known personality. But then, of course, Live Aid and all of that just made him a global star. And then the work he did around those charities was just amazing. Anyway, he kind of got sick of it all, I reckon, in the 1990s, and he was under so much pressure that he decided to get back to a band and do a tour. But what he wanted to do was a tour of regional Australia, as far away from, New York and London as he could get. So he was doing a tour around Australia, but I was in Mildura picking grapes, and he was playing in the local RSL club in Mildura, which was really cool. And I was backpacking at the time. And myself and my mates went along, and he did all the hits. It was amazing. And then afterwards at the bar, we saw him, ordering a drink, and we couldn't help ourselves but go up and say, "Hey, Bob, we're from Dublin too." And he was really lovely, and he turned around and he was asking us about, our trip and what we were doing. And when we said that we were picking grapes in Mildura, and he said, "Oh, I used to pick peas when I was young." And one of my mates, Eamon, was really drunk. And Eamon's a bit of he can be a bit of a character when he wants to be. And he goes, "Peas? You were picking peas?" And Bob Geldof says, "Yeah." And he goes on with the conversation. And then a minute later, Eamon says, "Peas? You were picking peas?" And Bob Geldof turned around. You could just tell that he was getting a bit annoyed. And he says, "Yeah, how the hell do you think they get in the bloody can?" And he stormed off. And it was just one of those really embarrassing moments where if I had my time again, I would have asked him a really insightful question, but instead I had to put up with peas.
But I love that because it's you, Dermot, and it was just it made me laugh because I was reading it last night and I was like, oh, I just love that. And I love our listeners to hear that as well. So thank you. So my actual question for you is, how do you tell the difference between distractions and noise and actual impactful leadership? And particularly this, for me, is, when people want to come in and talk to you as a leader, how do you tell the difference between, you need to be there with them versus actually this is probably not a good use of your time, particularly as a leader?
Sure. Look, I guess that again has two aspects to it. There's a personal productivity aspect and probably a cultural productivity aspect. I think coaching and mentoring your team as much as possible to help them to come to you with relevant and well thought out questions, and therein lies the meaning in the story about Bob Geldof. If we had a thought about what would we ask Bob Geldof in a succinct way, we could have had a much more profitable conversation with him, but we didn't. And I think often people will come up and interrupt a leader and they haven't thought about what the issue is properly. They haven't thought about any solutions for themselves. They just go up and say, I've got this problem, and then they vomit it out. So I think coaching and mentoring people to do that is helpful. But I also think that giving people some framework for prioritization can also be helpful as well. So I often talk about, ask teams, how do you prioritize? And I often find that people can't necessarily answer that question. It's quite often an instinctive thing. And my experience is people often prioritize by urgency rather than importance. And there's an equation I often use when I talk about prioritization, which is urgency multiplied by importance equals priority. And that makes sense. And I think most people will look at that and go, yeah, okay, I can get that. But my belief is that we need to change that around. It's the wrong way around. That the sentence should read importance multiplied by urgency equals priority. And that means that we need to get people to look at work through the lens of importance first, and then through the lens of urgency. And even leaders don't do this. They just simply react to whatever the noise or the interruption or the distraction is, without first of all looking at it through that lens of, is this a good use of my time? Is this a better use of my time than what I'm trying to concentrate on right now? And if people just pause for a moment and did that more, they'd be able to sort out the noise from the signal, if you like.
Nice, great answer. Thank you, Dermot.
Awesome. Loved that one. And Mum sending the virtual hug there as well. Love that. Thanks, Danette. Grahame, I'll go to you now. Grahame, what was your question? Tell us a bit about why you chose it as well.
Well, I've now got 5 questions. One was just around timing of you picking grapes in Mildura, because I spent a few years down in a little place called Dermot, which is about 20 minutes away.
It would have been 1994.
No idea. I probably wasn't there then. Wouldn't have been far off it, because I also played in the band that played at the Mildura RSL club.
Fantastic.
That's it. Just hanging off your coattails and doing a terrible job. Did you lose any of your fingers in the grape picking, Dermot, just out of curiosity? Any scars?
I didn't lose a finger, but I almost lost a toe. I got an infection in my foot because we were picking in 40-degree heat in very sweaty conditions. I got a foot infection and ended up in the hospital in Mildura. And because certainly at the time, Irish backpackers didn't have access to Medicare. So one of my mates was from Northern Ireland and he did have access to Medicare. So he gave me his Medicare card and he just said, look, just pretend you're Connor and you'll be able to get. So I went into the hospital and I'm in the waiting room and I give him my card as Connor and I'm waiting for them to call me. I waited 8 hours and nobody had seen me.
Wow.
And when I finally plucked up the courage to go up and say, look, is anyone ever going to see me? They said, oh, we called your name hours ago. And I said, oh, I didn't hear it. And it says, yeah, we called Connor. And I went, oh, bloody hell. Of course, I wasn't listening out for Connor. I was listening out for Dermot. So, yeah, God, this Mildura seems to throw up a lot of stories.
It does. Damn. Bloody Australian accents. If only we could get it right. Yeah. So my question, part of the background, I guess, to my question was just trying to understand where the lines blurs between time management and self-management. And so my question was, which do you think has a greater impact on quality productivity. And I sort of emphasize the quality thing because, we've probably all been in a space where we've been super productive, but what we're pushing out is pretty ordinary. So which, in your experience has a greater impact on quality productivity? Is it managing our time or managing our focus and attention? Because they are sort of subtly a little different.
Yeah, look, I think I would have traditionally said time management was the most important thing because it's my natural bias. And this is something I only really learned about myself through writing my new book, Lead Smart. My realization was that time is just one of the resources that we've got to manage to help us to be productive. And I reckon that there are some people like me, I'd label myself an organizer. So I use the resource of time predominantly to get stuff done. And I love that. I love being organized. I love having a schedule. I love having a prioritized task list. I love getting my inbox to zero. So that really suits me. And I kind of, for many years, I kind of thought everyone was either like me or everyone should be like me. But when I was writing Lead Smart, my realization was a lot of leaders that I work with, they don't necessarily operate that way, but they're still highly productive. And I realized there was other biases and other archetypes out there. So another archetype might be the energizer, who isn't necessarily using the resource of time to get stuff done, but they bring a huge amount of energy to bear on what they do. And myself and Danette know someone who would put up her hand and say, yes, that's me. Our friend Lisa, who just has a ton of energy, and she leaves everything till the last minute, but then she just applies tons of energy. She brings everyone along with her and she gets stuff done. I also think there's a third archetype, which is the analyzer, and they're people who are really good at managing their focus and their attention. And what I would say is, my realization is none of these are wrong, and we should try to use all of them. If we were to be truly effective in what we're doing, we would sometimes lead with time, and we would sometimes lead with energy, and we would sometimes lead with focus.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one of the messages I have for leaders, to say, okay, you might not be like me, you might not be naturally an organizer, but if you could build that skill up and be able to then lead with that in certain situations, that's going to be helpful to you. And knowing which resource to use in what situation can be helpful. So today, where I've got a number of interviews, I'm managing my energy enormously. I'm not really managing my time too much, except turning up on time to the interviews. But, on Monday, where I'm getting stuff done in a different way, I'll be managing my time, and I'll have my task list, and I'll be going tick, tick, tick. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it does. I like it. Thanks, Dermot. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dermot. And great question, Grahame. I'll throw to John now. John, what was your question? And tell us a bit about why you chose it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jess. So, Dermot, my question came from the fact that, I've been in training for a long time, working with magical learning for a long time, but, I keep watching. Yeah, it was through a conversation I had with a mate of mine who was talking about, he's an accountant and going to uni and doing lecturing. But it seems to be that we almost rinse and repeat for the next generation. So you sort of, you throw out your training to leaders, to whoever, and then the next generation comes along and it's almost, well, now we've got to start again with them and build up. So there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way that we can start that early or get that pushed down in a way, whether it's through leaders and coaching and mentoring, as you were talking about, or even as parents. How do we pass on those good practices to the next generation in order to make them stick, so that, it's like the buffalo theory, the weak ones fall away, but the buffalo herd speeds up constantly and we evolve?
Great question. So I'll answer that in two ways. First of all, I reckon when it comes to productivity, especially as leaders, we need to make sure that we are actually demonstrating good behaviors, because people learn from us. If you think about your way of organizing yourself right now and how you've cobbled that system together, you've probably taken lots of things from people along the way, people that you worked with, your old boss, and you mirrored what they were doing. And the problem is that when you've got a disorganized leader, then the chances are you're going to have a disorganized bunch of young people who learn from that leader and therefore transmit bad productivity generationally, if you like. So that's a part of it. Get more organized and coach people on best practice. The second thing that you want to think about, though, is culture. And if you've got unproductive cultures, and generally when I talk about productivity cultures, I talk about three cultures. I talk about your email culture, your meeting culture, and your urgency culture. And if they are unhealthy, then people are drowning in noise and information. They are spending all of their time in unproductive meetings, or too much of their time in unproductive meetings. And they are potentially being too reactive and not proactive enough because everything is urgent.
Yeah.
So if you want to shift that, you need to do it generationally. And that you do that by creating a different culture, a more productive and a healthier culture. My latest newsletter was on this very subject. I talked about Gordon Ramsay. Now, okay, you might say I don't quite think of Gordon Ramsay when I think of good leadership, but I truly believe I'm reading his book at the moment, and I don't think that he's the monster that the shows that he's been on make him out to be. He is actually a very good leader, and he has built up an empire of restaurants. But the one that is closest to his heart is Restaurant Gordon Ramsay in England. And in that, he talks about the DNA that he has created. And the DNA is things like lightness. So that's a word he uses a lot. So he wanted to move away from the heavy, creamy, French-based cooking. So lightness is in everything that he does. A second one would be seasonality. So he changes his recipes according to what is seasonally in the shops. That has created a culture in his restaurants that has meant that after 25 years, whether he's there or not, everyone in the restaurant knows how to cook and what to cook. He's created a culture.
I think that's a great example. And I wanted to add in I guess Kanika's question, because it's also about culture, but this is from a different I guess perspective, or we've kind of covered the leader's perspective. But this question is for both a leader and for someone lower down the corporate structure. What are some good steps to take if you feel like the workplace's culture could be improved?
Yeah, this is the really challenging thing, because we can talk about creating more productive cultures, but a lot of people don't necessarily feel that they've got any agency. And I'm often working with people who they feel like they're victims of their inbox, and they're victims of their schedule, and they're victims of reactivity. There's nothing I can do about it. So I reckon that's the first thing that a leader needs to do, is to actually empower people to make a change and to give them agency and have conversations about, in this case, about those productivity cultures. So that's definitely a good starting point. I reckon that culture is just a set of group behaviors and beliefs. And if you want to shift the culture, what you need to go back to is, first of all, having a common understanding of what the DNA of the team, to go back to Gordon Ramsay, what is it? What are the intentions that you all bring to the table when it comes to how you work together? And, you know, those intentions, when I talk about productivity cultures, I would say that people should work in a way that is purposeful, work in a way that is punctual, that is reliable, and that is mindful. So they, for me, they kind of set the intentions of the team, a bit like Gordon Ramsay when it comes to, seasonality or lightness. They set people's intentions. But the problem is there's a big gap between good intentions and actual behaviors, especially when people get busy and get stressed and get overwhelmed. So the thing that bridges the gap between intentions and behaviors are team agreements, I believe. If you can put a set of simple, clear team agreements in place, that will hold you to account and also allow you to hold other people to account on as to how we're going to work together. Those team agreements will keep people on track. They will drive the behaviors of the team, and the behaviors of the team then set the culture, whether it be your urgency culture, your meeting culture, or your email culture.
That's great, Dermot. I've been taking so many notes, especially about these different types of people and these different types of cultures you can kind of work with. It's such a easy framework, but it's making so many things make a lot of sense in my mind. So thanks so much for these ones. I might go to Allegra, who we should also say will almost be finished uni by the time this comes out. So very exciting that she's doing an animation course, but she's sending this question, which is, delegating can be harder for some people than others. What are some tips for people who may struggle to pass responsibility on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, I work with a lot of people and leaders included who should delegate more and they don't. And often when they do delegate, they don't necessarily delegate effectively. So, I'll talk about myself first of all. I was the type of person who found it hard to delegate work. Because I was an organizer, because I was so highly organized, I could get a lot of stuff done myself. So I would come up with all sorts of reasons why I wasn't going to delegate to other people, even when I had other people to delegate to. I would often hold on to things because I'd think that, look, they're really busy and I don't want to overload them with more. Or I'd tell myself the story that, look, by the time I delegate it to them, I might as well have done it myself, so I'll just do it myself. There was all these stories I told myself, but the realization for me was whenever I didn't delegate, there was always an opportunity cost. So I really believe in the idea that every time you say yes to something that you should have said no to, you were also saying no to something that you could have said yes to. There's always an opportunity cost. So I got to thinking, and this is after some mentoring from somebody else, I got to thinking about every time you don't delegate something that you should, that is dragging you down below the line, and it's making you very busy, but you're not necessarily having impact. So I have a very clear line now, and what is above the line are the things that I can do that really add impact. And when I'm down below the line, I'm doing stuff that, yeah, sure, I could do them, but I'm not having the same impact. So I always think about that opportunity cost, and I'm now quite ruthless. Even if it would only take me a minute to do it, if it's something I should delegate, I delegate it anyway, because, and of course, this is the best tool you can use to grow people as well. So there's many reasons why we should delegate. So having that clear line in your mind is a really good thing. And then the second thing I'd say is that a lot of people don't delegate because they don't want to lose control. And they're worried that they won't remember, or they won't be able to follow it through to its conclusion, and that's going to reflect badly on them. So having a good system in place to help you to control the work is a really good idea. So, for me, if I delegated something to Jez, and I needed to make sure that got done by a certain time, I'd probably schedule a reminder for myself in my task list and say, due Jez podcast recording. And that just is a simple way for me to maintain some level of control that, 3 weeks isn't going to pass and I'm going to go, oh, I never got that from Jez. So I'm maintaining some control, but I'm leaving it to him to do the work. Sometimes what you need to do is to have a visual control mechanism between you and the other person. So Danette, you were talking about OneNote as a tool that can help you to manage your work. I'm also a big fan of tools like Microsoft Planner or Trello, a Trello board, something like that, as a very visual way of making work visible across the whole team. And if I delegate something to somebody else, I might put it onto a Trello board or a Microsoft Planner board. And that way, we've both got visibility over what needs to be done, who's responsible for it, when it's needed by, and any associated information. And if we, on a weekly basis, both come together and review that board, it allows us to have the right conversations to maintain control over that piece of work. So simple things like that can really help.
That's great. And I like that there's a couple of different options there for, people that are more visual and what have you. But I think through that answer, I think you've teed up my question kind of nicely. But I also now kind of have a second question that I'm going to kind of roll into this one. So my question was, what's the best way to be available for your team, but also be able to set good boundaries and protect yourself, which we were kind of just talking about a little bit then, and how should you go about finding that balance? But I guess my real question after listening to the previous answer is how did you help define your boundary that you were talking about there, where you have things at a certain line above and below? What was that process for you like?
Yeah, it was an interesting process, and again, Danette will be familiar with this because it comes from some work that I've done with a guy called Matt Church, who we both know quite well. Matt was one of my mentors, and one day Matt had a conversation with me that kind of went like this. He said, Dermot, one of the things that I worry about with you is you don't seem to manage your time very well. And I went, but, I'm the time management expert. I'm the organizer. And he went, yeah, look, I know that you're highly organized and you've got everything in the system. I'm not saying that. He said, it's what you're spending your time on that worries me, because you seem very, very busy, but I'm not sure that you're busy doing the right work. And he was completely right. And what it translated into was a real shift in my mindset around how I allocated my time through the week. And, to this day, and that was, going on 10 years ago, we had that conversation. To this day, I think about my week in 4 ways. The 4 key things I want to spend my time on are think, sell, deliver, and team. So they're what I call my lanes. So I'm kind of using the swimming analogy, the way someone says, stay in your lane. Well, they're the 4 lanes I want to stay in: think, sell, deliver, and team. If I'm not thinking about productivity or writing content, creating content, if I'm not having sales conversations about it, if I'm not actually delivering training or a keynote speech, or I'm not working on something to lead my team, then I'm not in my lane. So that was one perspective, if you like. And then I overlaid that on top of that and the above the line, below the line perspective, which again, Matt introduced me to. That just seemed like a really nice way to think about, okay, if they're your 4 lanes, what would be the above the line activities in those lanes? So what are the things in those areas that truly have impact and really only you can do because you are the thought leader or you are the business owner or whatever? And then what's below the line that is still within those 4 lanes? Well, what are the things that are below the line that are dragging you down? And what could you do with them? Well, could you delegate those to somebody else? Could you simplify them or streamline them in some way? Could you get rid of them from, why are we doing this at all? And I reckon those 2 perspectives help me to constantly focus on the things that have the most impact. Now, am I perfect at this? No. I get dragged down below the line all the time. I get pushed out of my lanes all the time. But I'm much better at managing that now than I was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, even.
Yeah, that's such a good good tip there, because we do also talk to a lot of people that magical learning included, where you start your own business and you have to kind of do everything, and it's kind of, I guess, what you're talking about now is like, when you're sort of doing a bit better, you can kind of create those things where you're like, I'm doing just this, and that makes you so much more effective. I think it's amazing. So great stuff, Dermot. I might grab some final thoughts from everybody, because I've taken a bunch of notes, but I'm sure everyone else has been saying stuff. So I might start with you, Danette. Danette, any final thoughts on Lead Smart in today's conversation?
Well, I have to say, love the book, learned heaps, have already started implementing, because that's what you need to do. You need to read and take action. There were so many good takeaways. I really like that flipping the urgency by importance equals priorities to my favourite thing is always focus on important first. So, but I love the fact that you then paired that with the urgency to equal priorities, because sometimes, you've got the importance, but that urgency is also driving. So working that out in that way. I really love that, Dermot. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been awesome, and I am going to give you another hug.
Awesome. And great.
Had my hugs recently in Fiji.
We did. We had a few.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Danette. Great questions.
I did not
today.
hear that. I did not hear.
We're all at a very acceptable distance.
Well, Grahame, I'll actually stay with you. So, any final thoughts today on the conversation and Lead Smart?
So, Dermot, thank you. It's been fantastic. Like, there's lots of notes. I have a question back in the conversation around delegating, and it was sort of more, how do you help somebody be much more open to being delegated to, and could you address your response to Danette? But we won't go there.
Yeah.
The last question I had was, if Bob Geldof is listening to this podcast, which is almost certainly going to happen, what question would you have asked him with the benefit of, what are we looking at? A few years hindsight, 29. What question would you ask him today if you met him at the bar, Mildura RSL Club?
I think I'd probably like to know what has made him, what aspect of all of that, and there was a lot of light and shade in what happened to him. So even though he was doing amazing work for people around the world, he got absolutely slammed for just trying to further the Boomtown Rats and his own career.
Yep.
What lessons did he take out of that whole experience that have made him a better person today?
Nice.
I've always wondered how he coped with the negativity that came with all of that.
Yeah. Have a good tribe around you. Thank you. Love your honesty, your openness, the growth for yourself, and just having conversations with people who challenge some of your beliefs and being open to thinking differently about that. And I love the fact that you continue to share what you learn. So you and Danette very much kindred spirits in that context. So thank you. It's been great having you on.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Grahame, and great questions today. John, I'll throw to you now. Any final thoughts on today's conversation and Lead Smart?
Yeah, Dermot, thoroughly enjoyed it. And I guess the takeaway for me, and the one I'm still sitting with, is you were talking about the swim lanes, and you had those 4 swim lanes. But, what are my swim lanes is the thing I'm just reflecting on and trying to work out. And how do they differ between what I do at Magical Learning to what I do in my 9 to 5 to what I do at home to what I do with my other activities as well? And how do you get the time allocated to each of those to make sure that you're having a productive day where you need to and having a restful day where you need to as well? So yeah, just that question around what are my swim lanes and how do they vary between things?
And that's the work you need to do. So I'm very clear about they're my lanes, and yeah. Everyone has maybe similar, but they will be different lanes. But this is all about distilling it down to what's important, and it could be family is one of your lanes. It could be you've got a particular hobby or passion. That's one of your lanes, and that is totally fine. And look, 4 is just a number. It could be It could be 5. It could be 3. But I guess less is usually better than having 15 lanes. I tend to say, between 3 and 7 is probably a good place to go.
All right.
Sit down with a piece of paper, A3 piece of paper, and map it out for yourself.
Yeah, thank you.
John, would it be fair to say that your single swim lane at home is painting? Is that appropriate?
Yeah, it would be fairly. Well, no, I've actually got a second one. It's now mowing lawns. So between the 2 of them, yes, and the mowing lawns.
Mow your lanes into the grass. It looks.
I'll try that. I don't think my daughter will appreciate it, but yeah, I'll give it a crack. I've got 5 acres to choose from, so I've got plenty of room.
Love that, John. Thanks so much, and great questions today. I loved it. Dermot, any final thoughts on today's conversation and Lead Smart as well?
Yeah, look, I'd just like to say thanks for the opportunity to come and talk about my new book. It is fantastic to write a book and really get to distill your thinking and then take it out into the world. And it's funny, as people might think that you get a lot of feedback on your book. You actually don't. It's a vacuum, and every now and again you have a conversation like this, and you actually realize that it's meaningful to people and it makes a difference. So I really appreciate that. Hope your listeners have enjoyed this and get something practical that they can take away. If they're interested in the book, it's on it's on Amazon, it's on Booktopia, it's in the airport bookstores and all the main bookstores. So love if you grab the copy and had a read, and then reach out to me. My details are in the book if you think it's interesting.
Great. Thank you so much, Dermot. And we'll have all those links available in the podcast description, so you can just jump straight into that and go check them out. Yeah, perfect. Well, that's amazing. I'll have all those ready for everybody. I want to thank you so much, Dermot. This was a real blast. We had a great time. We'll definitely have you on another time soon at some point to maybe discuss your next book, or maybe just more interactions with Bob Geldof, hopefully. We'll see. But
Peace.
Peace.
Pick up the phone, Bob. It's not hard.
We'll call that next episode peas and thank you, hopefully, if he sends it a voice memo. But until then, everybody that's been sharing it, we really appreciate it. That's been going really well. And to everybody, as always, have a magical week.